The sound of the slap echoed through the cavernous throne room like a thunderclap. 10,000 alien dignitaries froze in stunned disbelief, staring at the human who dared strike the Galactic Emperor. Samuel Brown stood defiantly before the elevated dais, his hand still raised, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He had come to the Zarantine homeworld to negotiate a fair trade agreement and non-aggression pact with the Empire that spanned 1,000 star systems. But the Emperor's decree to annex Earth by force, his sneering dismissal of humanity as primitive and unfit, had pushed Samuel past the breaking point. "Humanity will never surrender to tyranny," Samuel declared, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the throne room. "We may be young on the galactic stage, but we have endured and triumphed against impossible odds throughout our history. If you think you can enslave us without a fight, you are sorely mistaken." The Emperor rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with rage and humiliation. He gestured sharply to his guards. "Seize this insolent creature. I want him executed immediately for his affront to my divine authority." Armored Zarantine guards swarmed forward, their weapons trained on Samuel. He didn't resist as they grabbed him roughly, wrenching his arms behind his back. As they hauled him away, Samuel locked gazes with an alien aide named Antares, who looked shaken by the Emperor's cruelty. In that moment, a flicker of understanding passed between them, a shared realization that the Zarantine Empire was not as invincible or righteous as it claimed. Samuel was dragged deep into the bowels of the Imperial Palace, to a dank detention cell where he would await a swift and brutal public execution. Earth's diplomatic mission had failed disastrously, and now his homeworld faced imminent invasion and conquest. As he paced the narrow confines of his cell, Samuel's mind raced, desperately seeking a way to escape and warn Earth of the coming storm. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and he could not, would not, fail them, even if it cost him everything. Samuel paced the confines of his dank cell, his mind churning with desperate plans of escape and warning Earth of the impending Zarantine invasion. The cold metal door suddenly hissed open, and Samuel spun to face the unexpected visitor. To his surprise, Antares, the alien aide who had seemed unsettled by the Emperor's cruelty, slipped into the cell. "What are you doing here?" Samuel asked warily, studying her reptilian features for any sign of deception. Antares glanced over her shoulder before answering in a hushed tone. "I am a member of the Starlight Resistance, a rebel faction opposed to the Emperor's tyrannical reign. Your defiance in the throne room has sparked whispers of rebellion across the subjugated worlds." She produced a small holographic projector from her robes and activated it. Ghostly images sprang to life, depicting scenes of unimaginable brutality. Zarantine soldiers enslaving entire populations, ravaging planets stripped of resources, and alien corpses piled in mass graves. "The Emperor's wealth is built on a foundation of slavery, genocide, and theft," Antares explained grimly. "If we could broadcast this evidence across the Empire, it would shatter his legitimacy and inspire widespread revolt. But we lack the military strength to protect the transmission long enough for the full message to spread." Samuel studied the horrific images, a plan taking shape in his mind. "If I can convince Earth to provide military aid to your rebellion, could you help me escape and deliver this evidence to your leaders?" Antares's eyes gleamed with hope. "Yes, an alliance with your people may be our only chance. I will find a way to free you and—" The cell door slammed open, and a squad of heavily armed Zarantine guards stormed in. "Prisoner, your time has come," the leader snarled, seizing Samuel roughly. "The Emperor demands your immediate execution in the Grand Plaza." As they dragged Samuel away, Antares mouthed a silent promise. "I will create a diversion. Be ready." Samuel was paraded through the streets like a trophy, his hands bound behind his back, surrounded by a phalanx of guards. Alien crowds jeered and cursed him as he was led to a raised platform in the center of the Grand Plaza, where the Emperor awaited with a triumphant sneer. "This human dared to strike me, your divine ruler," the Emperor bellowed to the assembled masses. "Now he shall pay the price for his insolence. Let this be a warning to all who would defy the might of the Zarantine Empire." Samuel was forced to his knees before a firing squad, the muzzles of their weapons trained on his heart. The Emperor raised his hand, preparing to give the order to fire. Samuel closed his eyes, bracing for the searing impact of plasma bolts. A deafening explosion ripped through the plaza, sending aliens screaming and scattering in panic. Smoke billowed from the shattered remains of a nearby statue, and through the haze, Samuel saw Antares and a handful of rebels engaging the Imperial Guards in a vicious firefight. Antares fought her way to Samuel's side, pressing a small transmitter into his hand. "Use this to contact your ship and arrange extraction," she hissed, her voice strained with urgency. "I will hold off the guards while you escape. Go, now." Samuel nodded grimly, clambering off the platform and sprinting through the chaos-filled streets as plasma bolts sizzled past his head. He ducked into an alcove and activated the transmitter. "This is Samuel Brown, requesting immediate emergency extraction at these coordinates. Repeat, I need extraction now." The response crackled through the tiny speaker. "Acknowledged, Ambassador Brown. Shuttle en route, ETA 90 seconds. Samuel raced through debris-strewn alleys, following the transmitter's guidance toward a secluded landing pad on the outskirts of the plaza. Behind him, the sounds of battle raged, punctuated by the distinctive whine of Antares' plasma rifle. He skidded to a halt as an Earth shuttle swooped down, its hatch already yawning open. Samuel leaped aboard, shouting for the pilot to take off. As the shuttle blasted into the sky, Samuel watched in gut-wrenching horror as a massive Zarantine warship descended on the plaza and unleashed a devastating barrage of plasma fire, obliterating everything and everyone below. "Antares, no!" Samuel shouted, banging his head against the shuttle's viewport in anguish. The brave rebel who had risked everything to save him, who had handed him the key to defeating the Emperor, was gone, vaporized by the merciless Zarantine onslaught. Aboard the Earthship orbiting the planet, Samuel frantically opened a secure channel to the United Earth government back home. He uploaded Antares' evidence of the Emperor's atrocities, pleading with the leaders to support the Starlight Resistance. "The Zarantine Empire is poised to invade Earth," Samuel insisted, his voice raw with urgency. "Our only hope is an alliance with the rebels. With our military might and their knowledge of the Empire's weaknesses, we may stand a chance. Antares sacrificed her life for this moment. We cannot let it be in vain." As he waited for a response, Samuel gazed out at the stars, his heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. The Emperor's tyranny had to be stopped, regardless of the cost. Antares had lit the spark of rebellion with her courage and sacrifice. Now it fell to Samuel to ensure that the flames of resistance would spread across the galaxy, consuming the Zarantine Empire and bringing an end to its reign of terror. The Earthship cut through the inky void of space, its engines thrumming with impossibly strong power. Samuel stood at the bridge viewport, his eyes fixed on the blue-green orb of his homeworld, growing larger by the second. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched the data chip containing Antares' damning evidence. "Entering Earth's atmosphere in 2 minutes, Ambassador," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Samuel nodded, squaring his shoulders. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on him, driving out all thoughts of rest or respite. As the ship descended through wisps of cloud, he rehearsed his plea one final time. The landing was a blur of flashing lights and stern-faced security personnel. Samuel was whisked away to a secure briefing room deep within the United Earth government's headquarters. He found himself facing a semicircle of grim-faced leaders, their expressions a mix of skepticism and concern. "Ambassador Brown," intoned President Chen, her voice clipped, "we've received preliminary reports of your incident with the Zarantine Emperor. Explain yourself." Samuel took a deep breath and launched into his account. He described the Emperor's plans for Earth's annexation, his own defiant act, and Antares' sacrifice. As he spoke, he activated the holographic projector, filling the air with ghostly images of Zarantine atrocities. "This is the true face of the Empire," Samuel declared, gesturing to scenes of devastation and brutality. "They won't stop with Earth. The entire galaxy is at risk." Murmurs of shock and dismay rippled through the assembled leaders. Defense Minister Okafor leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Even if what you say is true, Ambassador, How can we hope to stand against an empire that spans 1,000 systems? Before Samuel could respond, an aide burst into the room, datapad clutched in her hand. Madame President, urgent news from our deep space monitoring stations. All eyes turned to the large view screen dominating one wall. It flickered to life, displaying a stream of incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. Grainy footage showed alien crowds surging through city streets, toppling statues of the Emperor. On a dozen worlds, Zarentine garrisons found themselves besieged by newly emboldened resistances. It's already started, Samuel breathed, a mixture of hope and trepidation coursing through him. My act of defiance, it must have been a catalyst. President Chen's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the implications. This changes everything. We may have an unprecedented opportunity here. She turned to Samuel, her gaze sharp. Ambassador Brown, you've dealt with these rebel factions before. Can they be trusted? Samuel nodded emphatically. The Starlight Resistance has been fighting the Emperor's tyranny for years. With our help, they could turn the tide. Hours of intense debate followed. Samuel argued passionately for an alliance with the rebels, countering every objection with carefully reasoned responses. As reports of spreading unrest continued to pour in, he sensed the momentum shifting in his favor. Finally, President Chen called for a vote. Samuel held his breath as hands were raised around the room. When the final tally was announced, he nearly sagged with relief. Earth would join the fight against the Zarentine Empire. Ambassador Brown, President Chen said, her voice solemn, you've convinced us to take an enormous risk. The fate of our world may well rest on the success of this alliance. We're appointing you as our official liaison to the Starlight Resistance. Your mission is to coordinate our aid efforts and help bring down the Emperor. Samuel nodded, the enormity of the task before him sinking in. I won't let you down, Madame President. I won't let Earth down. Within days, Samuel found himself aboard a stealth transport, slipping past Imperial patrols to reach a hidden rebel base. As the ship touched down on a desolate moon, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The real work was just beginning. A hulking alien figure waited at the foot of the landing ramp, arms crossed over a battle-scarred chest. So, growled Commander Zorax, his reptilian eyes narrow with suspicion, you're the human who slapped the Emperor. Let's see if you're as useful as you are bold. Commander Zorax's eyes narrowed as he studied Samuel. Useful? We'll see about that. Follow me. Samuel trailed after the hulking alien through winding corridors carved into the moon's rocky surface. They entered a crowded war room where beings of various species huddled around holographic displays. Our intel suggests the Emperor's communications hub is vulnerable, Zorax growled, gesturing to a pulsing red dot on a star map. We strike there. Samuel leaned in, examining the defenses. Earth's stealth ships could get us past the outer perimeter. A lithe, blue-skinned alien with cybernetic implants stepped forward. I'm Karis. I can disable their security systems. And I'll blow the doors wide open, added a reptilian female, her scales shimmering with an iridescent sheen. Name's Lyra. Over the next days, they honed their plan. Samuel worked alongside the Earth Commandos, led by the grizzled Captain Jack Harrison. As the hour of the raid approached, tension crackled through the air. The stealth ships slipped silently through the inky void, their sensors dark. Samuel's heart pounded as they neared the massive communications hub. Karis's fingers flew over his console, disabling security protocols one by one. They docked undetected. The moment the airlock hissed open, plasma bolts sizzled through the air. The Emperor's cybernetic guards had been waiting. Cover me, Lyra shouted, sprinting forward with an explosive charge. Samuel and Zorax laid down suppressing fire as she planted the device on the inner blast doors. The explosion rocked the station. Through the smoke and debris, human commandos and alien rebels surged forward. The control room erupted in chaos as they clashed with the Emperor's elite forces. Samuel ducked behind a console, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast that left the metal smoking. Beside him, an Earth soldier crumpled, a charred hole in his chest. Samuel grabbed the fallen trooper's weapon and returned fire. Inch by bloody inch, they fought their way to the central hub. Zorax roared as he grappled with a cybernetic guard, ripping its arm free in a shower of sparks. Samuel vaulted over a barricade, landing next to the main control panel. "Hear us now," he shouted. The blue-skinned alien's cybernetic implants pulsed as he interfaced with the system. "We're in. Broadcast network is ours." Samuel's hands shook as he inserted the data chip containing Antares' evidence. The images flashed across every screen, scenes of devastation, enslavement, and brutality inflicted by the Emperor's forces. He leaned into the transmitter, his voice carried to countless worlds. "People of the galaxy, you've been lied to. The Zarantine Emperor is a tyrant who has built his empire on genocide and oppression. Rise up, join us in toppling this monstrous regime." Alarms blared as reports flooded in. Uprisings erupted across a dozen systems. Even on the throne world, confusion spread through the ranks of the Emperor's own guards. A massive explosion rocked the station. General Razek's counterattack had begun. "We need to hold this position," Captain Harrison bellowed, organizing the human commandos into a defensive formation. Wave after wave of Imperial troops assaulted their position. Earth's advanced weaponry cut through their ranks, but more kept coming. Samuel fired until his weapon ran hot, the air thick with ozone and the screams of the dying. A deafening roar filled the air as Razek initiated an orbital bombardment. The station shuddered, entire sections shearing away. "We can't hold," Zorax shouted. "Fall back to the ships." The hulking alien commander turned to Samuel. "Go, I'll cover your retreat." "Zorax, no!" But the rebel leader was already charging forward, bellowing a war cry as he carved through the Imperial forces. Samuel sprinted for the docking bay, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. As their ships blasted free of the dying station, he watched Zorax disappear under a tide of enemy soldiers. They limped back to the hidden rebel base, battered but alive. As Samuel staggered from the ship, a slender alien with familiar features approached. "I'm Zalara," she said, her eyes glistening. "Antares was my sister." Samuel felt a jolt of recognition, seeing echoes of his fallen friend in her face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "She saved my life." Zalara nodded, her gaze intense. "Then we'll honor her memory by finishing what she started." As they walked together toward the command center, Samuel felt a spark of connection. They had both lost someone dear in this fight. Now they would carry on that legacy, whatever the cost. Samuel and Zalara strode side by side through the rebel base's bustling command center. Holograms flickered with real-time intelligence from across the galaxy, each blinking light representing another world throwing off the shackles of Imperial rule. "The momentum is with us," Zalara said, her eyes gleaming with fierce drive. "But we need to strike decisively before the Emperor can regroup." Samuel nodded, studying the tactical display. A cluster of red icons caught his attention. "The Zather system," he murmured. "Their shipyards are exposed." Captain Jack Harrison approached, his weathered face creased with a wolfish grin. "Earth's first interstellar warships are ready for action, Ambassador. Just say the word." In the following days, a plan took shape. Ships from newly liberated worlds poured into the hidden rebel staging area, forming an armada unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Samuel felt a surge of pride as he watched Earth's sleek warships take their place in the formation, their hulls gleaming with untested power. The night before the assault, Samuel found himself drawn to Zalara's quarters. She answered his hesitant knock with a knowing smile. "I thought you might come," she said softly, pulling him inside. Their lips met with desperate intensity, months of unspoken longing finally given voice. As they fell onto her bunk, Samuel marveled at the alienness of her skin, so like Antares's, yet uniquely her own. In the quiet aftermath, they held each other close, drawing strength for the battle to come. The rebel fleet erupted from slipstream space in a blaze of weapons fire. Imperial ships, caught completely off guard, scrambled to mount a defense. Samuel stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship, barking orders as Captain Harrison orchestrated a masterful assault. "Multiple targets acquired," the ship's AI intoned. "Firing solutions plotted." "Execute," Samuel commanded. Lances of coherent light sliced through half-constructed Imperial vessels. Explosions blossomed in silence across the Zathor shipyards, leaving behind twisted wreckage and atomized dreams of Imperial expansion. As the last Imperial defender fell, a cheer went up across the rebel comms, but Samuel allowed himself only the briefest moment of satisfaction. "Set course for the throne world," he ordered. "We end this now." The rebel fleet surged forward, only to encounter a sea of mines planted by the cunning General Razek. Samuel's mind raced, recalling Earth's naval history. "Captain Harrison," he called out, "remember the North Atlantic convoys?" The grizzled captain's eyes lit up with understanding. "Aye, sir, I know just what to do." Under Harrison's expert guidance, the fleet adopted intricate formations, detonating mines from a safe distance. When the dust settled, a clear path lay before them. As the fleets clashed in the void, Samuel led a strike team to the surface in stealth shuttles. Plasma bolts sizzled past as they fought their way to the shield generators. With a thunderous explosion, the palace's protective barrier fell. "Zalara, you're clear!" Samuel shouted into his comm. Above, her bomber wings swooped low, pounding the exposed fortifications. The landing platform trembled beneath Samuel's feet as rebel troop carriers touched down. He raised his weapon, ready to lead the charge into the heart of Imperial power. Victory was within reach. A horrifying scream pierced the air. Samuel whirled to see a churning cloud of metallic particles engulf a rebel soldier, reducing him to a pile of organic slurry in seconds. The nanoswarms had been unleashed. "Fall back!" Samuel bellowed, firing futilely at the approaching cloud. "We need to evacuate the civilians." As rebel forces retreated in disarray, Samuel spotted a group of terrified Imperial citizens cowering behind a ruined wall. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward them, plasma bolts from Loyalist defenders sizzling past his head. "This way!" he shouted, gesturing toward an evacuation shuttle. "Hurry!" The grateful civilians rushed past him to safety. Samuel turned back to face the advancing nanoswarms, knowing that every second he bought could mean more lives saved. The ravenous cloud surged closer, and Samuel steeled himself for what might be his final stand. The ravenous cloud surged closer, and Samuel steeled himself for what might be his final stand. Suddenly, a familiar voice crackled through his comm. "Samuel, fall back now!" Zalara shouted. "We've got incoming!" He dove behind a crumbling wall as a barrage of plasma bolts rained down, vaporizing the nanoswarm's leading edge. Zalara's fighter screamed overhead, buying precious seconds. Samuel scrambled to his feet, sprinting towards the rebel lines. His lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, the terrifying hum of the nanoswarms growing ever louder behind him. He vaulted over a makeshift barricade, landing hard beside Zalara. Her face was streaked with grime and sweat, eyes wide with fear and grit. "Those things are unstoppable," she panted. "Conventional weapons are useless." Samuel's mind raced. Maybe not conventional weapons, but... He tapped his comm, hailing the Earth flagship. "Captain Harrison, I need every scrap of data on our EMP technology. Now!" As the information flooded in, Samuel and Zalara huddled over a battered datapad. The sounds of battle raged around them. The screams of the dying, the sizzle of energy weapons, and the insidious whisper of the nanoswarms. "There," Samuel pointed to a schematic. "If we can capture that Imperial comm array, we might be able to jury-rig an EMP burst strong enough to disrupt the swarm's control signals." Zalara nodded grimly. "It's a long shot, but it's all we've got. I'll gather a strike team." Minutes later, they were on the move. Samuel led a small group of human and alien fighters through the war-torn streets of the capital. They used stealth and hit-and-run tactics to avoid the swarms, inching closer to their target. The comm array loomed before them, a twisted spire of metal and pulsing energy. Imperial guards swarmed its base, their cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the harsh light. "We need a distraction," Samuel whispered. Zalara grinned, hefting a plasma grenade. "Leave it to me." The explosion rocked the plaza. As the guards rushed to investigate, Samuel and his team slipped inside the array's control center. Their resident tech expert, a multi-limbed Xeraxian, immediately went to work. "How long?" Samuel asked, keeping his weapon trained on the door. The alien's tentacles flew across the controls. Minutes, maybe less. Alarms blared. The pounding of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. "We're out of time," Zalara shouted. The door exploded inward. Samuel and Zalara opened fire, cutting down the first wave of Imperial troops. But more kept coming. "It's ready," the Zeraxian called out. Samuel slammed his hand down on the activation panel. A wave of electromagnetic energy pulsed outward, momentarily overloading every piece of tech in its radius. For a heartbeat, silence fell across the battlefield. Then a deafening cheer rose from the rebel lines. The nanoswarms hung motionless in the air, their control signals disrupted. "All units, push forward," Samuel roared into his comm. "This is our chance." A surge of rebel reinforcements swept across the field, capitalizing on the brief window of opportunity. Samuel and Zalara led the charge, fighting their way towards the looming bulk of the Imperial Palace. As they neared the inner sanctum, a massive figure stepped into their path. General Razek, his cybernetic implants sparking from the EMP, but rapidly coming back online. "You'll go no further, rebels," he snarled. Before Samuel could react, Captain Jack Harrison and his commando team burst onto the scene. "We've got this, Ambassador," Harrison growled. "Get to the Emperor." Samuel hesitated, seeing the odds stacked against his friend. But there was no time. He and Zalara pressed on, the sounds of Harrison's desperate battle with Razek fading behind them. They reached the ornate doors of the throne room, blasting them open with concentrated fire. But instead of the Emperor, they found only an empty chamber. A mocking laugh echoed through hidden speakers. "Did you really think I'd wait for you, vermin?" the Emperor's voice taunted. "Farewell. I leave you to burn with my empire." Through the massive viewports, Samuel watched in horror as an elite Imperial cruiser rose from a concealed hangar, streaking for orbit. "After him!" Samuel shouted. They raced for the nearest landing pad, commandeering a sleek Imperial shuttle. As Zalara piloted them into the war-torn skies, Samuel patched into the rebel fleet communications. "This is Ambassador Brown," he called out. "The Emperor is fleeing aboard a cruiser. We need immediate interception." "Copy that, Ambassador," came the cool reply of Captain Lyra. "My squadrons are moving to engage." The shuttle shuddered as they broke atmosphere, the vast tableau of the space battle unfolding before them. Rebel and Imperial ships clashed in a deadly dance, energy weapons and missiles crisscrossing the void. Samuel spotted the Emperor's cruiser, its powerful engines pushing it ever further from the planet. Lyra's fighters swarmed around it, peppering its shields with laser fire. "We're not going to catch him," Zalara said through gritted teeth, pushing their stolen shuttle to its limits. Just then, a massive explosion bloomed on the cruiser's stern. Its engines sputtered and died, leaving it drifting in space. "Direct hit on the main reactor," Lyra's triumphant voice crackled over the comm. "She's dead in the water, Ambassador." Relief flooded through Samuel. They had the Emperor cornered at last, but before he could celebrate, alarms blared across every channel. "Energy spike detected," a frantic voice called out. "The cruisers launched some kind of weapon towards the planet." Samuel's blood ran cold as he saw the projectile streaking towards the throne world. He knew in his gut that this was no ordinary weapon. This was the Emperor's final, spiteful act. "We have to board that cruiser," he said, locking eyes with Zalara. "It's the only way to stop whatever he's launched." She nodded grimly, already adjusting their course. As they closed in on the crippled Imperial vessel, Samuel steeled himself for the confrontation to come. One way or another, this war would end today. The cruiser's hull reverberated as Samuel and Zalara's stolen shuttle docked. They rushed through the airlock, weapons raised, only to find eerie silence. The corridors were deserted, emergency lighting casting long shadows. "He's here somewhere," Samuel whispered, every nerve on edge. They reached the bridge where a lone figure sat slumped in the command chair. As they approached, the Emperor's body toppled forward, revealing a gaping wound in his chest. "No," Zalara breathed. A hologram flickered to life, the Emperor's sneering face looming over them. "If you're seeing this, you've won, or so you think. My legacy will reduce your precious alliance to ashes. The message dissolved, replaced by a countdown timer. 30 seconds. Samuel's fingers flew across the console, trying to abort the weapon's launch. It's no use, he growled. The only way to stop it is to destroy the cruiser entirely. Zalara's eyes widened in understanding. The reactor. They sprinted through the ship, precious seconds ticking away. In the engine room, Samuel located the coolant controls. Go, he said softly. There's no time for both of us. Zalara hesitated, then pulled him close for one last, fierce kiss. I'll never forget you, she whispered. Samuel watched her retreat, then turned to the controls. As the ship began to shake itself apart, he allowed himself a small smile. The cruiser detonated in a brilliant flash, taking the Emperor's final weapon with it. Months passed. Zalara stood before a sea of faces, human, Antarian, and a dozen other species, in the newly constructed Grand Assembly Hall on Zarantine Prime. We gather today, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, to honor those who sacrificed everything for our freedom, and to take our first steps toward a new era of peace and cooperation. In the front row, Captain Jack Harrison nodded approvingly. Their eyes met, a shared understanding passing between them. The road ahead would not be easy, but together, they would forge a better future for all. As Zalara continued her speech, outlining plans for a democratic council to guide the liberated worlds, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as armored figures burst in, their weapons emblazoned with the symbol of the Purge cult. "Death to the traitors!" a voice bellowed. "Long live the Empire!" Harrison leapt into action, tackling Zalara to the ground as chaos exploded around them. The first battle in a new war had begun. Zalara's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto the source of the chaos. Armored figures poured into the Grand Assembly Hall, their weapons spitting deadly plasma bolts. "Get down!" Captain Harrison roared, tackling Zalara to the floor as energy blasts sizzled overhead. The assembly erupted into pandemonium. Diplomats and officials scattered, seeking cover behind overturned chairs and ornate pillars. Security forces rushed to engage the attackers, their own weapons blazing. Zalara crawled behind a fallen podium, her heart pounding. She peeked out, assessing the situation. The attackers wore mismatched armor, but each bore the unmistakable symbol of the Purge cult emblazoned on their chest plates. "Death to the traitors!" one of the cultists bellowed. "Long live the Empire!" Harrison materialized beside her, his face grim. "We need to get you out of here," he said, checking the charge on his sidearm. Zalara shook her head. "No, I won't abandon these people." A nearby explosion showered them with debris. Harrison cursed, then nodded. "All right, but we do this smart. Follow my lead." They moved in tandem, staying low and using the chaos as cover. Harrison's precise shots dropped two cultists in quick succession. Zalara scooped up a fallen weapon, adding her fire to the fray. Across the hall, a group of human and Antarian delegates huddled behind an overturned table. A Purge cultist advanced on their position, energy blade humming to life. "Cover me," Zalara hissed. Before Harrison could object, she darted forward. The cultist raised his blade for a killing stroke. Zalara's tackle sent them both sprawling. They grappled on the floor, the energy blade singing as it carved furrows in the polished stone. With a desperate heave, Zalara slammed the cultist's head against the ground. His grip loosened, and she wrenched the blade free. "Run!" she shouted to the stunned delegates. They needed no further encouragement. Zalara turned, scanning for her next target. The tide was turning. Security forces had regrouped, their coordinated fire driving the cultists back. A scream pierced the air. Zalara spun to see a cultist holding a hostage, a trembling Zyraxian diplomat. The attacker's eyes blazed with fanatical hatred. "Behold the price of your betrayal," he snarled, raising his weapon to the Zyraxian's head. Time slowed. Zalara knew she couldn't reach them in time, but from across the hall a blur of motion caught her eye. Harrison, vaulting over debris, closing the distance in impossible strides. The captain slammed into the cultist an instant before he could pull the trigger. The Zyraxian stumbled free as the two humans crashed to the ground. They rolled, trading savage blows. Zalara raced towards them, but skidded to a halt as Harrison gained the upper hand. With ruthless efficiency, he pinned the cultist and delivered a final, decisive strike. Silence fell over the hall. Security teams moved methodically, securing the area and tending to the wounded. Zalara helped Harrison to his feet, noting the fresh bruises blooming on his face. "That," she said softly, "was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." Harrison managed a tired grin. Why not both? Zalara surveyed the devastation around them. The attack had lasted mere minutes, but its impact would be felt for far longer. This was more than an assassination attempt. It was a declaration of war. She straightened her shoulders, knowing what needed to be done. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command, "I believe it's time we discuss the formation of those human intervention forces you proposed." Harrison nodded grimly. "I'll make the call." As they turned to leave, Zalara caught sight of the fallen podium where she had stood such a short time ago. The wood was scarred and splintered, her speech notes scattered across the floor. The vision of peace and cooperation she had outlined now seemed like a distant dream. But as she looked at the diverse faces around her, humans, Antarians, and a dozen other species working together in the aftermath of the attack, she felt a flicker of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but they would face it united. "Come," she said to Harrison. "We have work to do." The dust settled in the Grand Assembly Hall, revealing the aftermath of the Purge Cult's attack. Zalara surveyed the scene, her mind focused. She turned to Captain Harrison, who was tending to a wounded delegate. "We need to act fast," she said. "This attack proves the Empire's remnants won't go quietly." Harrison nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we can't let fear dictate our response." Over the following weeks, Zalara and Harrison worked tirelessly to establish a new galactic order. They convened emergency sessions with leaders from allied worlds, hammering out the framework for a unified democratic government. In a packed auditorium, Zalara addressed representatives from across the galaxy. "Today we lay the foundation for lasting peace," she declared. "The Galactic Alliance will stand as a beacon of hope, built on the principles of equality, freedom, and mutual cooperation." As she spoke, holographic displays flickered to life, showcasing the proposed structure of the alliance. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Meanwhile, on Earth, crowds gathered in cities worldwide to welcome home their unlikely hero. Samuel Brown's family stood on a stage in New York City's Central Park, flanked by dignitaries and honored guests. Samuel's mother, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, stepped forward to address the sea of faces. "My son believed in the inherent goodness of all sentient beings," she said, her voice strong despite her grief. "His sacrifice reminds us that one person can change the course of history." As she spoke, a massive hologram of Samuel materialized above the crowd, his determined expression a silent testimony to his courage. In a quiet moment after the ceremony, Maria approached Samuel's parents. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach as she revealed the news of her pregnancy. Samuel's mother embraced her, a mix of joy and sorrow etched on her face. "Samuel lives on," she whispered. Back in the Alliance capital, the newly formed governing council convened for the first time. Zalara, having relinquished her executive powers, watched from the gallery as the elected chancellor took the oath of office. "With this transition," the chancellor proclaimed, "we honor the sacrifices that brought us here and look to a future of shared prosperity." As the applause died down, Harrison approached Zalara. "Earth's petition for membership has been approved," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "We're officially part of something bigger than ourselves." Zalara smiled, her gaze sweeping across the chamber filled with humans and aliens working side by side. "Samuel would be proud," she said softly. On a distant colony world, Lyra stood before a group of young cadets, human and alien alike. The setting sun cast long shadows across the training grounds as she activated a holo projector. "Today's lesson," she began, "is about the power of conviction. Let me tell you about a human named Samuel Brown." As Lyra's words painted a vivid picture of heroism and sacrifice, the cadets leaned forward, eyes wide with wonder. The legacy of the revolution lived on, a bright flame passing from one generation to the next. Years passed, and the Galactic Alliance flourished. On the surface, peace reigned across the stars. But beneath the veneer of unity, old wounds festered. On Outpost Zeta-9, a remote frontier colony, Ambassador Stephanie Harrison's shuttle touched down amid swirling red dust. As she disembarked, her young aide Jason hurried to keep pace. Latest intelligence suggests rising tensions among the local population, Jason reported, his datapad chirping with incoming alerts, particularly the non-human demographics. Stephanie nodded grimly. Let's hope diplomacy can cool things down before... An explosion rocked the landing pad, sending them sprawling. Alarms blared as smoke billowed from the colony's central hub. Incoming! A security officer shouted. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as armored figures swarmed from the shadows. Their battle cries echoed across the outpost. Freedom for Zeta-9, down with human oppressors. Stephanie and her team scrambled for cover behind cargo containers. She activated her emergency beacon, heart pounding. This is Ambassador Harrison. We are under attack by separatist forces, requesting immediate... A stun grenade detonated nearby, cutting off her transmission. As Stephanie's world faded to black, she glimpsed Jason being dragged away by the attackers. Back on Earth, Maria Brown sat in her twilight years, watching the crisis unfold on holofeeds. Her weathered hands trembled as she reached for the comm. This is Maria Brown, she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades. I need to speak with Alliance leadership immediately. In a high-security briefing room, Zalara's hologram flickered to life before the assembled diplomats and military brass. Her expression was grim. The separatists are demanding full independence for Zeta-9, she reported. They're threatening to execute the human hostages if we don't comply within 72 hours. Captain Jack Harrison, now silver-haired but still sharp, leaned forward. We can't give in to terrorists, but a full-scale assault could trigger uprisings across a dozen worlds. Maria's voice cut through the tension. We can't let fear dictate our actions. Samuel gave his life believing in unity. We must find another way. As debate raged, Ambassador Stephanie Harrison regained consciousness in a dimly lit cell. She took stock of her surroundings, noting the absence of Jason among the other captives. A guard approached, sneering. Your pet human is about to become a very public example. Stephanie's mind raced. She needed to act fast, but how? A plan began to form. She reached for a hidden communicator, praying it had escaped detection. Amara, she whispered, I'm calling in that favor. Light years away, a sleek smuggling vessel cut through hyperspace. At the controls, Amara, former rebel pilot turned outlaw, received Stephanie's coded message. Her eyes narrowed with persistence. Looks like it's time for some redemption, she muttered, plotting a new course. As Amara's ship streaked towards Zeta-9, the clock ticked down. On the colony, Jason found himself facing a firing squad, broadcast live across the galaxy. The separatist leader raised his hand, ready to give the fatal command. Suddenly, alarms blared. Amara's ship screamed overhead, strafing the compound with precision fire. In the chaos, Stephanie led a daring escape, freeing the hostages. But as they fought their way through twisting corridors, a chilling truth emerged. This was more than a simple uprising. The separatists had unleashed a technovirus, poised to infect the Alliance's central AI. We have minutes before it breaches the firewalls, Jason gasped, his fingers flying over a stolen terminal. Stephanie keyed her comm. Strike team, this is Ambassador Harrison. You have new orders. In the heart of the outpost, elite commandos battled waves of defenders. With seconds to spare, they severed the virus's uplink, averting catastrophe. As the dust settled, Jason approached Stephanie, his expression haunted. There's something I need to tell you, he began. About my heritage. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Alliance. Samuel Brown's bloodline, thought to be a symbol of hope, was revealed as a fabrication. On Earth, Maria received the news with a heavy heart. She stood before Samuel's towering statue, her frail form dwarfed by his immortalized rebel stance. As twilight fell, Maria closed her eyes, feeling the weight of years and unfulfilled dreams. The wind whispered through the plaza, carrying echoes of the past, of a defiant slap that changed the course of history, of sacrifices made and unity forged. But as Maria's strength ebbed away, questions lingered. Had they truly broken the cycle of oppression, or merely postponed the inevitable? She gazed up at Samuel's face one last time, searching for answers in the unyielding bronze.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.